Okay, Doug, can we record a little decompression here? You
Absolutely.
Don't have to obviously, you don't have to tell me
Absolutely. No, yeah.
any things I shouldn't know, but do you have any idea how insane that was?
No. It was in my head for a long time, so it's hard to know how insane it is.
I think that was the most incredible role-playing experience I've ever had.
That's extremely high compliments. Wow, was not expecting that.
Because of what you did. Like, you want notes? I can give you notes. But in terms of, I'm somebody who spends a lot of time developing a character, an exorbitant amount of time. And obviously, I kind of fueled myself by internalizing this and adding a lot of my personal history into this. So, like, all the incidental students are based on real people. And so I can navigate that. I mean, I was ready to go all the way to the canyon and smoke up with my pals.
Which is the idea.
Yeah, whatever happens, happens. But I knew at some point I was going to get sidetracked into something uncanny, but I didn't see it coming, especially because the last thing I would expect is that, this isn't just a Back to the Future role-playing game. This is playing an alternate timeline, and one that I am uniquely familiar with because I've read all of the comics.
Yeah.
So as soon as you tell me what's happened, I know where I am, and I can talk about a future in which Biff Tannen becomes president of the United States.
Yeah. I was going to show you, I did a mock-up for the time chamber, the one that you find in the mall.
Wow. So
I did that. Now, if I dropped that in there, would you have recognized that?
No, never. I'm not sure I've ever seen it before.
It's in the comic.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. There's a lot of, the comic is, for anyone who hasn't read the comic is absolutely incredible. Many volumes exist, and one volume was called Biff to the Future, which is an entire you wouldn't think it would be interesting, but it's fascinating and horrifying and happened before the Trump presidency. It's about the timeline of Biff from the moment that old Biff gives him the almanac all the way up till
his rise to power.
Yeah. And it's horrifying and awful and visceral. So the comics are absolutely incredible, each and every one of them. And a lot of them explore incidental stuff, but they also do a great job giving Jennifer a bunch of extra character. And I don't know how it's possible that something so unnecessary is so fulfilling.
Yeah.
But
hopefully this game is the same.
It is much the same, and it builds off of it. A bunch of stuff that you might not recognize from the movie that Doug was referencing. Doug didn't necessarily make it up. There's a lot of material that was from Bob Gale's additional timelines that I suppose I'm crediting Bob exclusively, but there were other comics writers that helped him do this, and all of them are very accomplished. So this is it's a pretty extreme scenario because you knew that I had this knowledge.
That's why I had to be careful.
Yeah.
And because I could have tipped the hand way too early. I thought if I showed you that image, you'd go, oh, I know what that is. And not that it would have been a bad thing, but it would have tipped it a little early as soon as you see it,
And honestly, there were two things that I thought it could be when you mentioned a Nazi scientist with a death ray. I thought it was either Back to the Future or Repo Man. But either way, I knew it was a misunderstanding, which made me think that it wasn't either of them. And the Back to the Future thing was only because, a crazy scientist, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I really didn't feel certain about that. I thought, no, it's not either of those. It's something else.
That's too far in one direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I kept thinking, is Doug sure that I've seen this? Because every now and then there's some piece of pop culture that I missed out on,
Sure.
So yeah, and when that shoe dropped, that was fucking shocking. But okay, so here's the thing. Here's why this is singularly great, because I was able to play a role that I internalized. So I knew the character really well. I could navigate that. It's not dissimilar from playing myself, except that I'm less sure because being a teenager helps nerf things a little bit. It takes away my agency, right?
Yeah.
Because, holy shit, the layers of, what if me, a transgender woman, was thrown back in time? That's terrible. I don't want it. But you made me have to deal with the real-life ramifications of time travel in a visceral and fundamentally personal way. I've had a lot of thoughts about it in the past. I've had a lot of thoughts about what that circumstance would legitimately be like, and different versions of it. But there's nothing, I can now speak to this, there's nothing quite like it happening completely by accident and when you least expect it.
That to me is Back to the Future.
Yes.
That's the essence of that, which is why if I told you what it was going into it,
of course,
it'd be totally different.
No, and if anything, the moments where I was lost in time and my character had the full realization of how fucked they were.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that had gone on even longer, even because granted, I'm still back in time, so we'll fucking see.
Yeah.
But the difficulties of surviving as a castaway, it's like traveling to another planet and frustratingly speaking the language, but nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not so far back that you'll just die from a disease. It's just far back enough that you'll feel completely and utterly alone and totally fucking helpless. And I was able to pull some crazy stunts. Like, Marty never had anything on his person that he could really, maybe he could have showed somebody the video.
He showed them his driver's license, some photos, and Doc just said that could be faked. That's anything.
Yeah, but you can't fucking fake the magic of modern technology.
And that was why I asked you very specifically, like, what are you taking with you when you go to meet Jimmy? Because it was like...
It's very important. Yeah. And what was I wearing, which I didn't really elaborate on enough, perhaps, but it was innocuous.
I figured it was innocuous enough that no one would really bat an eye to it.
Yeah. So this was an incredible journey. I don't know how anybody can ever sign up for this journey or another journey like it, even if it's a time travel story that doesn't involve intimate knowledge of the expanded Back to the Future universe.
Mm-hmm. And I would hope that even if you didn't have that expanded knowledge, that this was still...
Oh, I mean, because then you'd be even more
lost. Because this is the timeline, this is the time that they don't explore in the films.
Yeah. I mean, that was really only an advantage in my capacity to role play the reality of what Biff had done to the world.
Yeah.
Like, knowing about the way that he helped Richard Nixon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
By becoming a shitbag industrialist, gambler, tycoon piece of shit. So this is incredible. I don't know how people can sign up for a surprise experience, but people do it plenty of times with like escape rooms and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very glad we recorded this because I don't know how I'd ever explain this.
Right.
But it was incredible.
Thank you.
I'm very excited for what happens next.
My goal with this was to, like as you described, give you that feeling of unexpectedly caught up in a time travel scenario where you were not mentally or physically prepared for it.
Yeah.
And then given the autonomy and freedom to do what would you do? Like to literally let you walk around and do anything that you wanted to get yourself out of that situation. Whenever you would look for a hint, I would say, well, here's a possible way, and here's a possible way, but ultimately you still forged your own way. Mm-hmm. So, like, when you requested help, I would supply that or information, but really you're in the driver's seat of it. That was the beauty of it. At least that's what I was hoping, that it felt like you had autonomy in it and that not everything... I know there's a lot of talking on my part, but I hope that came across at least as that making the world feel more alive and not so much as things happening around you, even though you described yourself as a teenager who felt out of your element.
I mean, Kate's a kid. There's some parts where my autonomy isn't going to carry the story.
Right.
So I've really viscerally lived in Kate's skin for a while, and I'm on edge, because it's...
No, I couldn't be more happy to hear that. Because I thought if things go really well, I'll be like, wow, that was clever, Doug. You really did that. I'll be like, wow, yay, great. I feel great.
This has to be a single player thing. It doesn't have to be,
right.
But the intimacy of you and I, this helps me feel very alone,
right.
And that's important.
Well, if you're lost in time, that'd be the thing. Like, I thought you can do it with a group, but if they're doing like the two of us, we can get our heads together and we can figure it out. And there's a lot of easy things that two people can do that one person can't when you're trying to get out of like a dangerous situation,
Yeah.
Which is why I I won't go into detail about like where I thought the story would go versus where it went. But also like the grandparents being involved. That was a complete surprise. I didn't have names for them or nothing like that, which is why we had to come up with
you
names.
didn't. I mean, you didn't ask me to build that family, so we just did that on the spot.
So we just did. In fact, we, when I said, "Oh, we're gonna have Thanksgiving plans," you're like, "Oh, Thanksgiving? We probably have grandparents." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess you do." Like, it wasn't a thought.
I guess when all is said and done, I'm very curious to learn more about your process, but I'm not going to pry for that now.
The process itself was very different from any other game I prepared, which was part of this experiment. I will say that there are plenty of places to go.
Please
from here.
excuse the crude nature of
this show. Yeah. So there are lots of places to go with this, and ultimately Doc and like some of these other characters that you've met might provide options, but by no means do you need to let them be in the driver's seat the whole time.
Right. Do you feel that I did that this time?
I feel like you had the agency to do things, but there were moments where you were like, in character, just like, I don't know what I would do here because you're just a kid. So there was a little bit of like, when I sensed there was hesitation, I was glad that we had other characters like the grandfather there that could like be the protector and like the defender, and it almost becomes like a 2-player game at that point. But it all worked out fine. I was very happy with it. One thing I failed to take into account is that if you are, a teenager, not every teenager is going to be a badass who's, even Marty, all he did was look for Doc because Doc was his only friend that he could talk to at that time.
Yeah, I mean, Marty had an adult friend.
Yeah.
And all I've got are my parents.
Yeah, and you can't talk to your parents, so you took the gamble on grandparents.
The oldest guy I know is 2 months old or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's just a baby. And I just didn't know how a lot of things would integrate, like with parents showing. I didn't know how things would unfold, but I knew where people would be given the time. So like the city of Hill Valley in that time is like a map in my head. I know where people are and where they're going.
Yeah.
But the fact that you take the path that here to here to here to here, and ultimately it leads here, then it's like, well, then I guess this is happening, and if that happens, then I guess this has to happen, and then before you know it, it's kind of. I hope I didn't throw too much at the end and feel like I was taking away agency from your choices. Or punishing you, because I wasn't it at all. It was really just where I'm like, well, I think given the situation, this is what would happen, and it went from there. Because there was still a lot of stuff going on with Biff that he didn't vocalize. That he clearly had a suspicion based off of what his older self had told him.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh, one day there's gonna be a crazy scientist or some kid who starts asking questions, and what do you know? This is exactly what he was waiting for. So he knows there's some type of time travel thing involved, because how else do you explain the book that he got? So there's a lot of crazy shit outside of that you didn't even get a chance to dive into, because not like he would talk about it anyway.
Right.
But all that being said, you're in 1983. Biff is still very much alive.
What month was that?
You left off on April 30th, 1983. Saturday, April 30th, 1983.
Okay.
And he was going to be committed like maybe less than a week later.
So this is very strange.
The fact that he showed up?
The B&E that just happened here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But we will go into that later, maybe sometime.
Okay. By the way,
maybe sometime
also,
in the future.
Haha. I just want to say that I love that Lorraine had an opportunity to take vengeance on Biff.
Yeah.
Like, that was really satisfying to me. Like, it's such a fucking crime what he did to her.
That was the thing. It's like when I was doing my research, for this game, it was just like she clearly has a dark streak in her because of how she would stand up to him in that one brief moment. She's like, "Don't you dare talk that way about George. You're not half the man he is." So I feel like the rest of it is half the time it's an act out of self-preservation.
Right,
you know? So the moment this dude turns his back on her with something that's an opportunity too good to pass up, she fucking lit the fuse and is going to watch the whole thing burn down. And it's like, yeah, you destroyed a woman and you destroyed her life and her family, and you gave her the keys. You let her hold the keys to this machine, and now you're a popsicle. It's like that's what happens.
Yeah. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm thrilled you enjoyed it, and I am very curious to see where this will go. Like I said, I have an outline. I would love to play more because you took it into different directions I wasn't expecting. I was also enjoying it as it was happening, so I want to see where you go because, like, again, this is the most wide open sandboxed game I've ever run, and it's not just locations of Hill Valley, but like the fucking timeline is open, so anything can happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to do it again soon if we can figure out what to do.
Yes, please. This is the game that I'm living for right now.
So with that, I guess we're good. You want to go watch a movie?
Yeah, let's go watch a movie and get some dinner.